He didn't say thank you. Not once. Not when I folded his shirts. Not when I scrubbed the ring of mildew from under the guest bathroom sink. Not when I ironed the curtains or assorted his daughter's toys into neat plastic tubs. He just walked. Past me that morning, keys in one hand, coffee in the other, eyes on his phone, and muttered something about making sure the dinner was ready by 7. Like I was the help. Like I'd always been. I'm Ellen Marshall. I'm 73 years old. And that was the moment I knew I was done pretending he still saw me as his mother. Subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Thanks. He used to run toward me in little sneakers, squealing when I picked him up. I remember his small hands on my cheeks, his breath smelling like apples, his hair always warm from sun. I remember staying up with him through chickenpox and heartbreak and college exams. I remember taking on a second job at the pharmacy when his tuition outpaced our savings. I remember what it cost to raise him. But I don't think he does. I moved into their house after Frank died. Was supposed to be temporary, just until I got back on my feet. It's what I told them. But truthfully, I wasn't sure how to start over alone at 70. The house felt so big after he passed, so quiet, so hollow. I didn't want to rattle around like a ghost in it. My daughter-in-law said they had space. My son said he'd be glad to have me. I wanted to believe that was true. At first I told myself it was just adjustment. She was younger, had her ways. He was busy, distracted. I didn't want to be a burden. I stayed out of their way, mostly in the laundry room or the garden. I cooked, cleaned, helped with the girls. I ran errands when her back hurt and watched their dog when they went on trips. I didn't ask for anything, not even a birthday card, not even a chair at the table when her parents came to visit. She'd smile through her teeth and say, "Maybe next time." It'd avoid my eyes. I let them make me small, quiet, convenient. I stopped sitting on the couch when they were home. I started eating my dinner early, standing by the sink so I wouldn't be in the way. I stopped watching my shows. I told myself this was kindness, this was family, this was what mothers did. But what I didn't see until much later was how they had rewritten me, from matriarch to maid, from mother to servant, all under one roof, all while calling it love. It was the mail that did it. The envelope was thin, marked urgent. I almost didn't open it. It was addressed to me, but tucked behind a coupon packet. The letter was from the bank. A refinancing notice. My name wasn't on the house anymore. I stared at the paper so long I forgot to breathe. It was signed and notarized. 2 months ago, he hadn't told me. They hadn't told me. That night, I sat in the dark on the back patio while they laughed. Inside, I listened to their lives full and easy, as if I were part of the furniture. I let the air sting my face. I thought of Frank. I thought of all the deeds we'd signed together, the promises we made over morning coffee. And I thought, quietly, this isn't my home anymore. Maybe it never was. And that was the first time in years I heard my own voice clearly inside my head. It didn't cry, didn't scream. It just said, enough. Before he was the man who locked me out of my own life, he was my boy, my only child. I had him at 39, after 3 miscarriages and a doctor who told me to stop hoping. I remember lying on the delivery table, terrified and bleeding, whispering, "Please, please, please," into the ceiling tiles. When they finally placed him in my arms, I thought he looked like a question I'd waited my whole life to answer. I named him Daniel. It means God is my judge. Back then, I thought names mattered. He was quiet as a baby, always watching. I remember how he'd study my face like he was trying to memorize it. We didn't have much. Frank and I worked long hours, patching things together. But we gave him everything we could. I learned how to stretch $1 into a meal. I went without new shoes so he could have better ones. I taught myself how to hem his school uniforms when he hit a growth spurt mid-year. I smiled through exhaustion because I didn't want him to see how tired I was. I wanted him to feel safe. Like he belonged to something unshakable. When he was 8, he drew a picture of our house and put a crown over my head. Said I was the queen. I taped it to the fridge. Left it there until the ink faded and the paper curled at the edges. Even after he stopped calling me Mama. Even after he started coming home later. Even after he said I didn't understand the world he lived in. I left it there. Frank and I were different kinds of parents. He believed in tough love. I believed in love, full stop. We argued about it, especially as Daniel got older. Frank thought we were spoiling him. I thought we were pouring ourselves into him like a cup we prayed would never run empty. But even then, in the hard years, when the job market crashed, when Frank got sick, when I lost my hair from stress, I held on to one thing. Daniel would remember. He would know what we gave up for him. He would never forget where he came. From DOT after Frank passed, I stayed in the house alone for nearly 8 months. I wandered from room to room like a woman who'd misplaced her own body. I talked to the air. I made too much soup and froze it for a future that never came. I waited for Daniel to call more. He didn't. I told myself he was grieving to dot it. Was his wife who finally suggested I come stay. She texted me late one night and said, "We've got the space, come visit for a while." I reread it 5 times before I replied. My fingers shook. I didn't want to seem eager. I said I'd think about it. I didn't sleep that night. I arrived with 2 suitcases and a folded copy of Frank's obituary in my purse. The girls were happy to see me. They made me cards. She smiled at me through tight lips, already measuring how long I'd stay. Daniel hugged me briefly, like someone shaking hands with a neighbor. I remember thinking it would get better with time. It ended single quotes too. Slowly, I became something else in their house. Something useful, but invisible. I picked up after them, ran errands, sorted the pantry, folded clothes that weren't mine. She began leaving notes on the counter. Can you clean the windows? Take the girls to the dentist. Like I was part of the staff. Daniel never objected. He never said anything at all. Just moved around me, thanked me absently when I handed him a towel or fixed a loose button. He stopped asking me how I was sleeping, stopped calling me Mom. Sometimes he'd call me Ellen, like a polite stranger, and I let it happen. That's the part that stings the most. I let it happen because I thought I was helping. I thought this was how love looked when you were older, quiet, sacrificial, humble. I believed being needed was the same as being loved. One afternoon, I was scrubbing the kitchen grout with a toothbrush. Yes, a toothbrush, when I heard them laughing in the next room. Laughing about the dog's haircut. Laughing about something on the news. Their joy felt like a door I was not allowed to walk through. I sat there, knees aching on the tile, and felt like a guest in a story I had helped write but no longer belonged. I started noticing little things. My framed wedding photo tucked into a drawer. A guest blanket replacing mine in the linen closet. My books quietly moved into the garage. She had a way of doing things without saying them. She never asked me to leave. She just erased me, one item at a time. The night I found the bank letter. Something cracked in me, but it had been splintering for a long time. That envelope was just the final twist. I had spent 2 years convincing myself I still had a place. But there it was, in ink and numbers, proof that I was no longer even part of the paperwork. I was a guest at best. At worst, a liability they had quietly removed. I didn't cry. I made tea. I sat in the dark and listened to the house breathing without me. The walls didn't recognize me anymore. The floorboards didn't creak the way they used to under my steps. Everything was hers now. Even my son's silence. It wasn't rage that filled me. It wasn't even sorrow. It was something heavier and quieter. The feeling of being rewritten in your own life story. Like a footnote no one bothers to read. That night, took a notebook from the kitchen drawer and began writing things down. My bank logins. The deeds. Original copy, emergency cash Frank had hidden in the attic wall. I didn't know exactly what I was preparing for, but I knew I was done folding their towels and swallowing my name like it didn't matter. I went to bed with the letter tucked under my pillow. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The letter was still under my pillow, folded so tight it had left creases in the fabric. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long while, watching the light change on the wall. The house was quiet, not peacefully quiet, but the kind that follows. After something has already broken, I didn't make breakfast. I didn't put the kettle on. I just moved through the hallway like I didn't belong to it anymore. And maybe I didn't. I passed the girls' room and paused for a moment. One of them had taped a picture of me to her closet door. I was wearing my garden gloves, smiling wide. She'd drawn hearts all around it in red crayon. I let my hand rest there just for a second. Then I kept walking. When I reached the kitchen, she was already there, hair tied up, phone in hand, coffee steaming beside her. She didn't look up. "Did you get a letter from the bank yesterday?" Her voice was flat, casual. Like she was asking. If we were low on eggs, I said, "I did." She took a sip of her coffee. "It's just refinancing. Standard stuff, but I wasn't on it." You don't need to be. You're just living here. That word just. It landed like a slap. I remember standing there, feeling the breath slow in my chest. I wanted to ask how it happened. I wanted to ask when they decided I didn't matter. But all I said was, "I see." Daniel walked in a few minutes later, tying his tie. He looked at me, then at her, then down at the counter. He asked if the dry cleaning was ready. She nodded. I didn't say a word. That was the morning I stopped speaking first. I began watching more closely after that. I noticed how they spoke to each other in short, clipped tones when they thought I wasn't listening. How he avoided her eyes. How the girls sometimes glanced at me with something like worry. I began to see the cracks I had ignored. Maybe I wasn't the only one quietly breaking. I found the deed in an old folder in the garage, the original copy, still with my name on it. Frank had insisted we both be listed, even though it was Daniel's name on the new mortgage. Just in case, he'd said. You never know how things turn out. I used to laugh at that. Back then, I thought family was stronger than paperwork. There was a line in the file, a clause about property transfer, about signatures, about shared ownership. I sat with that document for an hour, tracing the ink with my finger like it might burn a truth into me. They had needed my signature to finalize the refinance, but I had never signed anything. That was when I understood they'd forged me. Maybe it was her handwriting, or maybe it was his. I couldn't tell. It didn't matter. What mattered was the fact that my name had been stolen, that they had taken something that wasn't just legal. It was mine. Mine and Frank's. Built through years of stretch paychecks and quiet sacrifices. They took it like it was nothing. I went to the bank that afternoon, wore my best coat. The teller recognized me. She'd helped me once years ago when I set up an account for Daniel's college fund. She called me Mrs. Marshall, and I almost cried just hearing my name said with care. I asked for the records. I asked for the signature file. I told them I had concerns. The manager brought out a folder. I opened it slowly, like opening an old wound. The signature wasn't mine. I didn't react. I just closed the folder and thanked them. I walked out into the sunlight and felt the cold hit my skin like a second truth. When I got home, she was on the phone, her voice hushed, sharp. Daniel wasn't. There, I went to my room and began packing. Not loudly, not in anger, just slowly, methodically, like someone folding herself back into a shape she hadn't worn in years. I packed only what mattered: documents, photos, the pressed flowers. From our wedding album, a single scarf Frank had given me the winter before he died. I didn't take the things I'd bought for them. I left those behind. Let them keep the folded towels and the polished dishes and the garden I had revived. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my bag by my feet. Daniel came home late. He looked tired. His tie was crooked. He didn't see the suitcase at first. Just walked in and poured a drink. Then he turned around. You going somewhere? I looked at him. Really? Looked at him. the face I had loved since the moment I first held it close. And I said yes, quietly. Just that, he stared at me for a long time. Then he asked, did she say something? She didn't need to. He nodded, sat down across from me. I expected him to ask me to stay, to say he was sorry, to say something, anything. But he just sat there, staring into his glass. I left early the next morning. The girls were asleep. She didn't come out of the bedroom. Daniel stood in the hallway. He didn't try to hug me. He didn't ask me where I was going. Take care, he said. I nodded. You too. I left the keys on the hall table. The ones I used every day to open the house I helped build. I placed the deed, the original one, beside them. Let them see what I still had. Let them remember what they erased. I didn't cry in the cab. I didn't look back. The city moved past the window in a gray blur. Buildings, trees, playgrounds I used to visit with the girls. I watched them pass without blinking. It all looked smaller than I remembered, distant, like a story I no longer belonged to. The driver asked where I was headed. I gave him the name of a motel I'd found the week before, a quiet place near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just clean. Sheets and a door that locked from the inside. I didn't have a plan past that, just space to breathe, space to think. Space where no one would look at me like I was in the way. When he dropped me off, I tipped him too much. He helped with my bag and asked if I'd be all right. I said I would. My voice surprised me. It didn't tremble. The room smelled like bleach and old air. There was a flickering light above the sink and a scratch on the mirror, but it was mine. I sat on the bed and ran my hands over the blanket. I wasn't anyone's guest. I wasn't anyone's help. I was just a woman alone in a room, holding her own silence like something holy. That first night, I didn't sleep much. I lay on my side, listening to the hum of the heater and the occasional sound of tires on the wet road. I kept the lamp on. The quiet felt too wide in the dark. I thought about Daniel. I thought about the moment he looked at me and chose not to say a word. I thought about how easily people can let you slip into invisibility, not by pushing, but by simply stepping aside and letting you fade. But under all that, I felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not pain. It was clarity. It's a kind of clean. Still knowing that rose from somewhere deep. I wasn't going back. That wasn't my home. That wasn't my family anymore. At least not in the way that mattered. The next morning, I bought a new notebook and a pack of pens from the gas station down the street. I made a list. Not of chores, not of groceries. A list of things I still had. My own bank account, my birth certificate, Frank's pension, the deed, not the forged one, the real one. It's the one with our names together, still breathing ink. Had it scanned and emailed to myself, saved copies to 3 places. I was careful, quiet, clean. I opened a small storage unit 2 towns over, paid in advance. I put everything there. The documents, the photos, a few keepsakes. I couldn't let go of. I didn't want them left in drawers again. I didn't want to be buried in someone else's house like forgotten silverware. I visited a lawyer next, not a big firm. It's just a woman with kind eyes and a slow voice. I told her everything. I didn't dramatize it. I laid out the facts like folded linens, the forgery, the refinancing, the erasure. She listened without blinking. Then she nodded. We can challenge it, she said, quietly, without noise. That's what I wanted. No shouting matches, no public battles. It's just truth handled with dignity. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my name back. I wanted my place in the story restored, not for them, but for me. In the motel room, I wrote letters I never sent. 1 to Daniel, 1 to her, 1 to the girls. I wrote everything I had never said aloud. Not to make them feel guilt, but to pull the words out of my own chest. I wrote until my hand cramped. I wrote until I no longer needed to. I started taking walks in the early mornings. There was a little park a mile down the road. Empty benches, a pond with dull water, stray cats that came and went like ghosts. I sat there most mornings, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. watching the world move around me. I wasn't rushing to belong to it. I was just breathing. One morning, a boy sat next to me on the bench. Maybe 10 years old. Hair too long, shoes untied. He said he liked my scarf. Said thank you. Told me his mother was late picking him. Up again? I didn't ask why. I just sat with him. We fed crackers to the birds and didn't say much after that. He came again the next day. I brought an extra juice box. Sometimes, all you need is someone who doesn't ask you to explain yourself. That's what healing felt like to me. Not some dramatic breakthrough. Not a scream into the void. Just quiet mornings. Clean rooms. Freedom to be no one's responsibility and no one's burden. I called the utility companies, removed my name. I sent a formal letter to Daniel and her notarized direct. I would not be returning. I relinquished nothing further. I left no forwarding address. I said only what was needed. No more than that. I thought they might respond. Call. Send something. They unsingled silence can be a final answer to. And still, I didn't wish them harm. I wished them awareness. One day, when the towels unfolded just right, when the groceries restocked themselves, when the house stayed clean without them lifting a finger, maybe then they would remember, not out of guilt, but out of grief for what they took for granted. I didn't need them to say they were sorry. I just needed them to notice that I was gone. The motel let me pay weekly cash. No questions asked. I liked that. No. The front desk clerk was a young woman. Named Elise, she wore chipped nail polish and a ponytail too tight for comfort. But she always smiled at me like I was someone who mattered. The first time she called me Miss Marshall, I nearly flinched. I hadn't heard my full name in months. Not without irritation tucked behind it. I stayed quiet. I didn't tell her why I was there. She didn't ask. In the evenings, I sat by the small desk near the window. It overlooked the parking lot, nothing to see, really, just a row of dented cars and a flickering street lamp. But something about it felt honest. To leave the curtain open and write in my notebook. Sipping tea I made with a tiny travel kettle I'd bought years ago and never used until now. I wrote down everything I remembered, not the dramatic things, just the small unspoken betrayals. It's the times she sighed when I entered the room. It's the way Daniel looked through me at the dinner table. The holidays I spent cooking meals they never even thanked me for. The birthday they forgot entirely. The time I found my photo in the trash, cracked frame and all, replaced on the mantel by one of her mother. I listed them like receipts, not to punish, just to remember. Because erasure begins. When you agree to forget, I didn't answer Daniel's first voicemail, or the second, or the one he left late on a Friday night when his voice cracked halfway through. I let them stack up like untouched dishes. I wasn't ready to hear him say anything, especially not now, when he finally realized I was missing. He didn't call me Mom in any of those messages, just Ellen, like he couldn't decide if I was still a person or just a problem to fix. She texted once, just once. We're sorry things turned out this way. Hope you're okay. No name. No warmth. Just a sentence that folded in on itself like a shrug. I deleted it. That week I made an appointment at the bank again, this time with a different manager. I brought the notarized copy of the deed, Frank's letters, and a record of the forged signature. I spoke clearly, calmly. I told them what had been taken from me. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. What I wanted was already done. My name restored, my share acknowledged, my rights quietly reinstated. I didn't need punishment. I needed protection. I asked for all communications to go through the lawyer. I wanted clean lines, no gaps for guilt to seep through. They agreed. The bank froze the mortgage activity. The legal office filed a notice. The house wasn't just theirs anymore. And they knew it. I imagined her reading that letter, her mouth tightening, Daniel pacing. Voices rising behind closed doors. The sound of blame being passed like a plate at a table I no longer sat at. I didn't feel joy. Just released. Back at the motel, I began giving things away. Little things I had carried too long. Scarves, teacups, a ring that never fit right. Elise's mother liked floral pins, so I gave her one from my old jewelry box. The boy from the park, his name was Julian. I learned, asked if I liked comic books. Said, not yet. He brought me one anyway. Sometimes I think children know when someone has been hurt, even if you never say a word. They sense the quiet. They respond to it gently. Julian and I started sitting together on the same bench. I brought juice. He brought stories. One day he told me I reminded him of his grandma who had passed. I asked why. He said, because you listen like you're still learning. I think that was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years. One evening, I sat in the motel room with the window open and the air just starting to turn cold. I listened to a voicemail. From Daniel. I'd saved that one not to forgive, but to understand. He sounded tired, hesitant. Said he didn't know how it all got this far. Said maybe they made mistakes. Said the girls missed me. But he never said, I'm sorry. Not once. He ended with, let me know if you need anything. And I thought I did. I needed something a long time ago. I needed to be seen. I needed to be respected. I needed my name, my place, my worth to be upheld without having to fight for it. But I don't need anything now. I've built a life where silence doesn't mean invisibility, where I'm alone but not erased. That night, I lit a candle on the desk, just a small one, a scent like lavender and dust. I watched the flame dance for hours. It reminded me of myself, not loud, not desperate, but steady, still burning, even. After everything, when I finally blew it out, the room didn't feel dark, it began slowly. The shift, the unraveling on their side of the story at first. It was just Daniel's calls, spaced days apart. Then ours, always short, always circling the same question in different words. Are you safe? Where are you staying? Can we meet? Each one left on my voicemail like a note slid under a locked door I never picked up. Not because I was angry, 'cause I was done being reachable only when they were ready to notice me. A week later, my lawyer forwarded an email. It was from Daniel, formal but clearly panicked. It's being contacted by the bank. He'd learned the refinancing had been suspended, that certain ownership details had been challenged. He said he didn't understand how any of this had happened. That part made me sit down. That he said he didn't understand. I'd spent 2 years cleaning their floors and quieting my grief in their laundry room. And now he said he didn't understand. My lawyer replied without emotion. She laid out the facts, the documentation, the breach. She asked that all further communication remain legal, professional, clean. The next email came from her, his wife. Her tone was less polished. She accused me of making a scene, of embarrassing the family, of dragging private matters into the system. I read her words carefully. She used phrases like poor boundaries and emotional instability. She said, I had always seemed lonely, even paranoid. She said she had welcomed me into their home and that I had taken advantage of that kindness. I sat with that email for a long time. Then I wrote a reply and never sent it. It said, I folded your clothes while grieving my husband. I scrubbed your floors while grieving my name. You mistook silence for gratitude. You mistook exhaustion for obedience. You mistook me, but I never pressed send. Not because I didn't mean every word, but because the silence had become stronger than any defense. Let them talk, let them twist the truth like they always did, wrapping it in prettier words than I ever learned to speak. I went to the park that day, sat on the bench under the maple tree. The leaves were starting to turn. A few drifted down and settled beside me, quiet and certain in their fall. Julian didn't show up. His mother had probably picked him up on time. That made me glad. While I sat there, I saw a family walking by. A mother, a teenage son, maybe 15. She reached out to tuck a strand of his hair behind his ear, and he didn't flinch. He let her. He smiled. I watched them until they disappeared into the distance. Some ache inside me softened. Not everything was lost in the world. That night, another voicemail arrived. Daniel again. His voice was different now, strained. He said he hadn't known about the forgery, that he'd trusted her to handle the paperwork, that he was sorry if I felt pushed out. Those were his exact words. Sorry if I felt. He asked if we could talk, just the two of us. He said he missed me, that the girls asked about me. I turned my phone over on the nightstand and left it ringing in the dark. They missed the meals, the routines. It's the comfort of someone absorbing all the hard edges of the day. But I don't think they missed me. Not as a person. Just as a service that had stopped running the next day. Elise at the front desk mentioned someone had come by asking about me. Said it was a man, wore a suit, asked if an older woman named Ellen was staying there. I asked if she told him anything. She smiled, shook her head, said she didn't know who he was. Said the only Ellen she knew was a quiet guest who paid on time and never asked for more than hot water and a working lamp. That night I moved motels. Different town, another quiet place, further out. I wasn't afraid. It's just certain. I disappeared. For them, once, slowly, without meaning to. This time I would do it on purpose. I left no forwarding address. I transferred the storage unit to a new location. I rerouted the few bills I had to a P.O. box. I kept only what fit in my bag and my memory. And then I waited to see how long it would take before they realized I wasn't coming back. It didn't take long. A week later, the lawyer sent me another letter, this time from Daniel's side, a formal offer to renegotiate the terms. An apology buried in passive language. Hopes to rebuild trust. They wanted peace, now that they'd been left with the full weight of my absence. Funny how people find language for repair only after they've broken something they can't replace. But I didn't respond. There's a kind of peace that lives on the other side of silence. It doesn't come from slamming doors or harsh goodbyes. It comes from the quiet knowing that you could speak and still choose not to. I had nothing left to prove. They could scramble. They could grieve. They could spin stories. But they would have to do it without me the next morning. I made myself a small breakfast in the motel's kitchenette toast, a boiled egg tea. I ate alone, slowly, with both hands on the table. Nothing rushed, nothing expected of me. Afterward, I walked to a small second-hand shop near the edge of town, bought a sweater, soft and warm. The kind I wouldn't have worn in their house, too bright, too bold, but it felt right now. It felt like mine that evening. I watched the sun set from the stairwell outside my room. It dipped low over the edge of the parking lot, casting long shadows that looked like stretched-out prayers. And I thought to myself, is this what it feels like to leave without slamming the door? This is what it feels like to disappear and still be whole. The new town didn't ask anything of me. That's what I liked most about it. It didn't recognize my name. It didn't know my history. No one looked at me like I owed them a smile or a casserole or a clean bathroom. I was just another woman walking slowly past the shops, holding a paper bag of groceries and a quiet story no one asked to hear. The motel was smaller, tucked behind an old gas station with a faded sign that still flickered at night. My room faced a narrow alley where wind scattered leaves like they didn't belong anywhere. I liked watching them. They reminded me of myself, moved not by noise but by quiet forces nobody saw. There was a woman at the laundromat named Rosa. She wore oversized earrings and hummed when she folded towels. We didn't talk much, not at first. She nodded when I came in, and I nodded back. That was enough. But one morning she offered me a seat while I waited for the spin cycle, said the bench gets cold. I thanked her. We sat in silence. Then she said, "You look like someone who's tired of being polite." I didn't laugh, but I wanted to. We didn't talk about details, not hers, not mine, but we started sitting together every Tuesday. She brought thermoses of sweet coffee and always saved the corner seat for me. One time, she handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a soft scarf, the kind you'd wear on a breezy walk. She said, "I thought the color might suit your voice, not your eyes, not your hair. Your voice. That's when I knew she saw me, and in that small life morning coffee. Quiet laundromats, scarf exchanges that meant more than birthdays ever did. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Whole, not needed, not tolerated, not managed, just hello. HOLE. I rented a small studio apartment a few blocks away. It smelled like pine cleaner and cracked windows. But it was mine. The key was heavy in my palm. I turned the lock twice every time I came home. I kept my shoes by the door and a little radio by the sink. I found a faded armchair at a secondhand store and dragged it home myself, inch by inch. It left a bruise on my wrist, but I didn't care. That chair became my favorite place on earth. I started cooking for one, not reheating leftovers that no one thanked me for. Not making meals I wouldn't be invited to sit down and eat. Just simple food. One pan, one plate, one quiet moment after another. I wrote too, not letters, not journals, just fragments. Sentences I'd always wanted to say, but never had the room for. You treated my silence like agreement. I was never your burden. I was your mirror, and you didn't like what you saw. I remember who I am, even if you don't. Sometimes I read them, aloud to myself, in the dark, in the kitchen. In the chair by the window when the moonlight softened the edges of the room. I wasn't performing anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone to clap. I was just telling the truth. One morning I got a postcard. No return address. No message except one line, dot. The girls keep asking why you left. I stared at it for a long time. The card was a photograph of a beach, some stock image, probably pulled last minute at a drugstore. It's the kind of thing you pick. When you don't know what to say, I flipped it over. No name. It's just that line. I didn't cry. But my throat tightened because I knew, deep down, I knew that those girls didn't do this to me. They had just grown up in the house where I disappeared, where my chair was slowly moved from the table, where my name turned into a task. They watch it happen, and maybe they didn't know how to stop it. Or maybe they thought that's how grandmothers live, just barely there, like wallpaper, always smiling, always sweeping, always vanishing. And now they were old enough to ask. I didn't write back. Not yet. I wasn't sure what I would say. That sometimes love isn't enough to keep you in a place where you're no longer seen. That sometimes walking away is the only way not to become a ghost. Or maybe something even simpler. That I miss them, but I'm not coming back. Not like that, not. To that version of myself, that night I lit a small candle and watched its flame in silence. I thought about all the things I'd been: wife, mother, cook, cleaner, errand runner. All the titles I was given without consent. All the ways I tried to stay needed, thinking that meant I was loved. And now, here I was. No titles. No roles. No place to report to. Just me, and for the first time, that was enough. I didn't expect to see him again. Not in that town. Not on that street. But there he was, standing outside the corner store, hands in his coat pockets, scanning each passing face like someone searching for a familiar ghost. Daniel. I didn't stop walking. I kept my head low, scarf pulled up to my chin, steps steady. But I felt it in my chest, that old pull, the one that once made me rush to his side when he scraped his knees, when his voice cracked with hurt. When he needed his mother and didn't have to say so. He looked thinner. Older. Maybe it was the light. Maybe it was something else. The kind of aging that doesn't show on skin, but in the way a person stands when regret starts weighing more than pride. I turned the corner before he saw me. Or maybe he did. I don't know. Later that evening, there was a knock at my door. Not loud. It's just one of those hesitant knocks, where the person on the other side isn't sure they should be there at all. I stood still, holding my breath, watched. The doorknob, like it might move, then another knock, softer this time. I didn't open it. Eventually, I heard footsteps retreating, slow ones, not angry, just quiet. I sat down in my chair, hands shaking, heart oddly calm. He had found me, or maybe he had stumbled upon me. Either way, the spell was broken. The silence wasn't mine alone anymore. The next day, there was an envelope tucked under my door, my name written on the front. Not Mom, not Ellen. Just for you. Inside was a letter, handwritten. He said he didn't know where to start, that he wasn't sure words could fix anything anymore. He said he'd been trying to explain it all to the girls, why I was gone, why I wasn't answering. He wrote that he hadn't known how far things had gone, how much I had buried just to stay close. He said he didn't defend me when I needed it. Said he chose silence because it was easier than conflict. And then this line, I let her treat you like a guest in your own legacy. I read that part twice. It was the only sentence in the letter that felt like it had come from the son I once knew. He said he wasn't asking to fix everything. It's just to say he sees it now, that he sees me. At the bottom, he'd left a phone number. No demand, no plea, just if you want to talk. I didn't call. Not that day. Not the one after. But I carried the letter with me, folded it carefully, read it once every morning, then again at night. I didn't tell Rosa. I didn't want to put words around something that was still unformed. Grief is like that. It doesn't move in straight lines, and neither does forgiveness. It wasn't hate I felt. It wasn't bitterness. It was something quieter. Like watching a fire die down after you've already warmed your hands and walked away. A few days later, I wrote a letter of my own. It was short. I told him I had been eroding in that house long before I left. I told him I still loved him. That love had never been the problem. But sometimes love isn't enough to undo harm that's been repeated, minimized, and never named. I said I didn't leave to punish. I left to survive. I told him I hoped he would teach his daughters to see the full shape of the women who raised them, not just the useful parts. I told him I was okay. I told him not to look for me again. Then I burned the letter. I sat on the back steps of my building and watched the edges curl. The ink turned to soft ash. It felt final, but not cruel. It felt like released. A week passed, then another. No more knocks. No more envelopes. The silence returned, this time as a gift, not a punishment. In that quiet, I found something I didn't expect. Peace, not the kind that feels triumphant, not the kind that comes from winning. Just the kind that arrives when you finally stop waiting for someone to give you what they never learned how to offer. The weather turned, leaves drifted down from the trees outside my window. I began sleeping with the windows cracked, letting the cool air move through the room like a new kind of breath. Rosa and I went to the flea market one Sunday. She bought candles. I bought a used coat, deep burgundy with silver buttons. It was a little too bright for me, too bold, but I wore it anyway. We sat on a bench with paper cups of soup. She asked me if I missed him. I said I missed who he was. When he was small enough to still need both my hands, she nodded. That made sense to her later that night. I stood in front of the mirror and buttoned the coat all the way up. I didn't look like a mother or a maid or a woman waiting to be remembered. I looked like someone beginning again. I keep a box by the window now. Not a large one. It's just something small, lined with cloth tucked into the corner where the sunlight lands for a few minutes each morning. Inside are pieces of the life I chose to keep. A photo of Frank and me on our wedding day, a pressed leaf. Julian gave me a note from Rosa that simply says, "You are not a shadow." Some mornings I lift the lid and run my hand over the items without taking them out. I don't need to. They're not tokens, they're reminders. It's not of what I lost, but of what I reclaimed. There's a rhythm to my life now. I wake up when the light shifts. I make tea. I open the window even when it's cold. I walk. I listen to the world instead of rushing through it. No one calls me mom here. No one calls me anything, really. And somehow that's become a kind of freedom. I am no longer defined by who I was to other people. Not a role, not a function. Just a woman with soft breath and steady feet and her own name, echoing quietly inside her chest. Sometimes I wonder if they talk about me. If the girls ask where I am now, she still insists. I was the one who broke the family. I no longer need the answer. When I left that house, I thought I was walking into emptiness. But what I found is space. Room to exhale. Room to remember myself. The truth is, I'd been disappearing long before I packed my bag. I had been vanishing piece by piece every time I was overlooked, every time I was spoken over, every time I was handed a task and not a thank you. That house didn't take me all at once. It wore me down like a path that's walked too often, till I became invisible even to myself. Now, when I catch my reflection in the window, I see someone. Whole, not polished. Not perfect, but here I still have the real deed, the original, the one with my name beside Frank's. It's in my storage locker, wrapped in a folder, sealed in plastic. I don't need it for proof anymore. I know who I was in that house, and I know who I'll never be again. Daniel hasn't called in weeks. Maybe he finally heard the silence as something final. Maybe he's still waiting for the part of the story where I come home and forgive everything. But there is no home to return to. Not for me. Home isn't where you keep your shoes. It's where your name still means something. A few days ago, I saw Julian again. He's walking home from school with his backpack half unzipped. He waved. When he saw me, told me he'd drawn something in art class, a landscape. Said he put a small figure under a tree, a woman sitting alone with a red coat. He said it reminded him of me. I asked him if the woman looked happy. He shrugged, said she looked calm. That was enough. I thought about writing one last letter, not to Daniel, to the girls. Something simple. Not to explain, just to remind them that I loved them, that I left not because I stopped, but because I started remembering what love is supposed to feel like. Started remembering what it meant to live in a room where I could breathe, all the way to the bottom of my ribs. But I haven't written it yet. Maybe one day. Maybe when they're older. Maybe when they're women who recognize the weight of an unspoken sacrifice. For now, I leave it unsaid. There's a peace in letting some stories stay whole in your chest. I've found a new rhythm in solitude. My days are my own. I bake when I feel like it. I light candles without waiting for an occasion. I sing sometimes, softly, when I'm folding laundry. Just for myself. No audience. No approval. One night last week, I walked out to this small garden behind my apartment. There's nothing much there. A few uneven paving stones, a metal bench that groans when I sit, but it's quiet. The moon was out. A pale circle resting above the trees like it was watching me. I took a photograph from my pocket, one I hadn't looked at in years. It was the three of us, me, Frank, and Daniel. Taken in the yard before a barbecue, Frank had his arm around me. Daniel was maybe 12, standing beside me, his hand tucked into mine. I stared at it for a long time. I let the ache come. Then I folded it slowly and placed it in the tin bucket beside the bench. Struck a match. Watched it curl and turn to smoke. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "Thank you for what was, and goodbye to what won't be." The flame died out. The air grew still again, and in that silence I felt something shift, not in the world, but in me. The ending wasn't loud, but it was complete, and this time I decide who gets to call me anything else. The end.